My name is Natalie Rowan, and I was 34 years old when my parents stopped me at the entrance of my sister's wedding and told me I was not family. My mother stood in front of the garden gate in a pale blue dress, smiling tightly while violin music played behind her, and said, "This day is for people who chose Sloane. You chose paperwork." My father would not look at me. My sister's name was printed on a welcome sign surrounded by white roses. Mine was missing from the seating chart. I had driven 4 hours with a wrapped gift in the passenger seat because my mother said, "Of course you should come. We are still family." But at the gate, she lowered her voice and said, "Do not make a scene, Natalie. You were not invited." So I placed the gift on the check-in table, turned around in my navy dress, and left without saying one cruel word. 3 days later, the same parents sat across from me in a title company's conference room with my sister, her new husband, and a real estate buyer waiting for one thing: my signature. They had promised to sell my grandmother's farm to cover a $43,000 wedding balance and a much larger family debt. What they forgot was that the only person authorized to sign the final consent was the daughter they had just told everyone was not family. And what they really forgot was that my grandmother had left me a letter, a trust file, and one sentence I had not understood until that room went silent. If they ask you to sign, ask them who was family before the money was needed. Before I tell you what happened in that conference room, welcome back to Hush and Tell Stories. If you have ever been pushed out of the family picture until someone needed your name on a document, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments who showed you their true face when paperwork appeared, and subscribe if quiet truth is the kind of ending you understand. I grew up in Havenbrook, Pennsylvania, a small town with church bells, maple trees, and the kind of families who could smile at each other in grocery aisles while keeping whole wars behind their front doors. My father, Graham Rowan, owned a landscaping company called Rowan Greenworks. He could make a yard look expensive, a client feel heard, and a bad decision sound like bad luck. He was charming in public and tired at home, and when he was tired, everyone was expected to step lightly around his pride. My mother, Meredith, was a woman who believed appearances were a second religion. She kept our house clean enough for strangers and cold enough for honesty. At church, she organized meal trains and called every woman sweetheart. At home, she could turn one sigh into a sentence. She never had to say, "You disappointed me." She just looked at you like you had ruined the lighting. My younger sister, Sloane, was 3 years behind me and always somehow ahead in forgiveness. If Sloane broke curfew, she was independent. If I questioned a rule, I was difficult. If Sloane cried, the room moved toward her. If I cried, my mother asked whether I wanted my father to come home to that face. By the time I was 12, I had learned that the easiest way to survive in our house was to become useful. I packed Sloane's lunch when Mom forgot. I helped Dad enter receipts for his business when he was behind. I cleaned the kitchen after school because Mom said she could not do everything. Useful daughters are praised right up until they ask who is using them. There were moments when I almost became the daughter they wanted permanently. At 19, when Dad's business account was overdrawn, I skipped buying winter boots and sent him $800 from my campus job. At 22, when Sloane totaled Mom's car, I helped cover the deductible because my mother said, "Your sister is already fragile, and you are so much better with pressure." At 25, when my promotion came through, my father said, "See, this is why God made you sensible," and then asked whether I could front the quarterly insurance premium until a client paid. That was how it worked: praise first, request second, silence afterward. Nobody called it borrowing after a while. Borrowing requires remembering who owns the money before it changes hands. In my family, if I could manage without something, it meant they needed it more. If I kept records, I was cold. If I asked for repayment, I was embarrassing them. If I said no, I was forgetting where I came from. Nana L. saw it before I did. Once, after my mother left the farm with 2 jars of lavender honey and $300 Nana had hidden in a teapot for groceries, Nana looked at me and said, "A soft voice can still be a hand in your pocket." I laughed then, because it sounded like something from one of her old mystery novels. I do not laugh about it now. My safe place was Larkspur Farm. It belonged to my grandmother, Elena Rowan, my father's mother. Everyone called her Nana L. The farm sat 20 minutes outside town, 40 acres of rolling grass, an old white farmhouse, 2 barns, and a line of sycamore trees along Mill Creek. It was not a working farm by the time I was a child. It was more like a piece of memory with a roof. Nana L grew lavender in crooked rows and kept a tin of butter cookies in the pantry. She had a laugh that started low and ended in a cough. She did not worship appearances. If the porch needed painting, she said the porch needed painting. If my father was avoiding a bill, she said, "Graham, that bill is not going to be scared off by your cologne." When I was 15, she taught me how to read a property tax statement at her kitchen table. Not because she thought I needed to know yet, but because she believed girls should understand every paper someone might someday ask them to sign. "Never sign a document just because someone brings it to you with urgency," she said, tapping the paper with her finger. Urgency is where people hide bad math. That sentence stayed with me. Maybe that is why I became a municipal grant compliance officer. I know that does not sound dramatic. My family certainly never thought so. My job was to manage federal and state grant records for public infrastructure projects. Water lines, library renovations, storm repairs, historic building funds. I read contracts, verify eligibility, track approvals, and make sure money is used for what it was promised to do. My father called it paper policing. My mother said it was good, steady work, which in her language meant useful but not I am. Impressive, Sloane said I was born middle-aged. But Nana L understood. "You are a guardian of details," she told me once. "Details are where the truth hides when louder people are talking." Sloane never liked the farm the way I did. She liked it for pictures. She liked the lavender when it was blooming and the porch swing when someone else had wiped it clean. But she hated mud, bugs, old plumbing, and Nana's habit of asking direct questions. When Nana got sick, the difference became impossible to miss. I was 28 then, living in Lancaster and working for the city. I drove to Larkspur Farm every Saturday with groceries, pharmacy bags, and folders of paperwork. I scheduled appointments. I labeled medicine bottles. I sat beside Nana during chemo and pretended not to notice when her hands shook. My father visited when guilt lined up with convenience. My mother sent soup twice and posted both times on Facebook. Sloane came for one afternoon, took a photo holding Nana's hand, captioned it "family over everything," and left before dinner because the farmhouse smelled medicinal. Nana noticed. She noticed everything. One evening near the end, when the late light was coming through the kitchen window and dust looked like gold in the air, she pushed a blue folder across the table. "I need you to know where things are." I did not touch it. "Nana, do not Nana me. I am not dying because we opened a folder. I am dying because my body is rude." I laughed because she wanted me to. Inside was a copy of the Larkspur Farm Preservation Trust. She had put the land and house into a trust years earlier. The terms were simple enough for me to understand, but careful enough to matter. My father could live on the property if he needed to. The land could not be sold for commercial development unless both living adult beneficiaries consented in writing. Sloane and I were equal remainder beneficiaries. I was named successor administrative trustee because, Nana said, "Your father avoids paper and Sloane thinks signatures are decoration." I looked at her. "Why me?" "Because you read. That's not a reason. It is the reason most people get robbed." She explained that if the family ever wanted to sell to a private buyer for preservation or residential use, both Sloane and I could consider it. But if a developer wanted the land, the trust required my administrative review, beneficiary consent, and a separate attorney certificate confirming the sale was not being forced to pay someone else's debt. "That sounds very specific," I said. Nana looked out the window toward the barn. "Your father has expensive pride." I did not ask what she meant. I should have. She died 7 months later, on a Thursday morning, with me on one side of the bed and my father on the other. My mother arrived 10 minutes after the hospice nurse called time. Sloane arrived 2 hours later, crying so hard that everyone comforted her first. At the funeral, my mother told people Nana's last months had brought us all closer. I stood beside the casket with a tissue in my hand and the blue folder in my bag, wondering how many family stories survive only because the tired person stays quiet. For the next 2 years, the farm sat mostly empty. I paid attention to the taxes because Nana had taught me to. I paid the insurance once when Dad said cash was tight, but I documented it and sent him the receipt. That irritated him. "You do not have to make everything official," he said. "Official is how I remember what happened." He muttered, "You and those papers." The first time Larkspur Farm became a fight was during Sloane's engagement dinner. She was marrying Drew Callahan, a polished real estate broker from Pittsburgh with a square jaw, a watch too shiny for daytime, and parents who pronounced vacation like it had a capital V. Drew was not cruel to me. Not directly. He was the kind of man who looked through people until he knew whether they had value. His mother, Celeste Callahan, was elegant, controlled, and practiced in the art of complimenting with a blade. She told my mother the Rowan family had so much rustic character, which I somehow understood as an insult to every chair we owned. The engagement dinner was at my parents' house. Sloane wore a white jumpsuit. Drew made a toast about merging families, and my father beamed like he had personally closed a merger. My mother kept glancing at Celeste Callahan, measuring our plates, our flowers, our words. After dessert, Dad asked me to step into his office. Mom came too. That told me it was about money. Dad closed the door and leaned against his desk. "We have an opportunity with the farm." "What kind of opportunity?" "A buyer approached me." I felt my stomach tighten. "What buyer?" "Keystone Ridge Communities. They build upscale retirement cottages, very tasteful, walking paths, ponds, that sort of thing. The trust restricts commercial development." Mom sighed. "Here we go." Dad held up a hand. "It do. Ease not prohibit it. It requires consent. It requires review, which is why we are talking to you." Mom smiled, soft and dangerous. "Sloane's wedding is going to cost more than expected, and your father has had a difficult year with the business. This sale would solve many things." "How many things?" Dad looked away. I repeated, "How many?" "The offer is $1.4 million. The number sat in the room like a stranger. Mom rushed in. "More than enough to give both girls something, pay off what needs paying, and allow your sister to have the wedding she deserves." "The wedding she deserves does not decide what Nana's trust means." Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't talk like a lawyer. I am talking like the person Nana named to read the papers." Mom's voice cooled. "She named you because you were always around. That does not mean she wanted you to control everyone." I looked at my mother. "She named me because she knew someone might try to sell the farm under pressure." "Pressure?" Dad snapped. "I am your father. That is not an answer." Sloane knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. "What is happening?" Mom turned immediately into comfort. "Nothing, sweetheart, your sister is being cautious." Sloane looked at me, eyes already wet. "Please do not do this." "Do what?" "Make my wedding about you." I actually laughed once, not because it was funny, because sometimes a sentence arrives wearing its own clown costume. "Sloane, I did not bring a developer to your engagement dinner." She flushed. Drew appeared behind her. "Maybe we should all take a breath." I looked at him. "Did you know about the buyer?" His silence answered first. Then he said, "I know some people at Keystone Ridge. It is a legitimate offer." Of course he did. A real estate broker with a developer ready to buy family land right as wedding costs rose. Details are where truth hides when louder people are talking. "I am not signing anything tonight," I said. Dad's voice hardened. "No one asked you to sign tonight." "Good," Mom said. "This is why we cannot have one happy event without you making it procedural." Sloane started crying. Drew put his arm around her. Dad looked at me as if I had slapped her. The evening ended with my mother telling me I should go home before I said something I could not take back. I drove back to Lancaster with Nana's old sentence in my head. Urgency is where people hide bad math. After that night, wedding planning became a weather system I was blamed for but not allowed to see. Sloane had chosen Rose Hill Conservatory, a glass-walled venue outside Pittsburgh with indoor gardens, stone fountains, and a price tag that belonged in a medical bill. There were custom invitations, imported flowers, a string quartet, 2 photographers, a champagne tower, late-night food trucks, and welcome bags for out-of-town guests. I knew all this because my mother talked about it in public posts and never in direct messages to me. When I asked whether she needed help organizing guest logistics, she wrote, "We have it covered." When I asked Sloane if she wanted me at the bridal shower, she replied, "It is mostly friends and mom's people." Mom's people. I sent a gift anyway. It was acknowledged by a thank you card written in my mother's handwriting. The bridal shower happened at the Foxglove Tea Room on a Sunday in March. I found out from photos posted by my mother, not from an invitation. Sloane sat under a balloon arch holding a crystal cake stand while Mom stood behind her with both hands on her shoulders. The caption said, "My beautiful girls make every season brighter." Girls, plural. I was not in the picture. I was not in the room. But she had used the plural because it looked better to the women from church. 2 days later, Mom sent me a link to the registry with no greeting. I bought the stand mixer. Not because I was foolish enough to think it would make me visible, because a part of me was still trying to behave like the sister I wished I had been allowed to be. Thank you note came 3 weeks later. "Dear Natalie, thank you for the mixer. Sloane and Drew appreciate your generosity. Love, Mom, not Sloane, Mom." That was when I began saving wedding-related messages in a folder on my laptop. Invitation missing. Shower photo. Registry link. Thank you note. Dad's proposal email. Mom's pressure text. I did not know what I was building yet. I only knew that my body was learning the old lesson again. When a family starts changing the story, keep the paper. Then, 6 weeks before the wedding, Dad called. "No hello. Have you reviewed the Keystone paperwork?" "What Keystone paperwork?" I emailed it. I checked. He had sent a 10-page letter of intent at 11:43 the night before. "Dad, this is not a purchase agreement. It is a developer proposal. It is a very good proposal. It has a 45-day due diligence period, rezoning contingencies, and a clause allowing assignment to related entities. Nana's TR. Ust requires more review than this." He exhaled loudly. "Do you hear yourself?" "Yes. You sound like a stranger." "No, I sound like the person you need because a stranger would not care what Nana wanted." Silence. Then he said, "We need this, Natalie." There it was. Not the family needs this. Not Sloane dreams of this. Not the farm deserves this. How much debt are you in? That is not your concern. If my signature is involved, it is. He hung up. 2 days later, my mother texted, "Your father is under enormous pressure. Sloane is heartbroken. I hope you are proud of how much power you have over everyone." I wrote back. "Power is not the same as responsibility." She did not reply. The invitation never came. Not by mail, not by email, not by text. But 5 days before the wedding, my mother called. Her voice was warm in a way that made me sit down. "Natalie, I know things have been tense." "Yes, your sister is emotional. Brides get that way. But Saturday is still family. I hope you understand that." "What does that mean?" "It means you should come with an open heart." "Am I invited?" A pause. "Don't be difficult." "Mom, am I invited?" "You are her sister." That was not a yes. But longing is a poor translator. It hears what it needs. So I bought a navy dress. I wrapped a gift, a framed watercolor of Larkspur Farm I had commissioned from a local artist before the sale fight began. I wrote a card to Sloane and Drew wishing them a marriage built on truth, patience, and kindness. I almost crossed out truth. Then I left it. On the morning of the wedding, I drove 4 hours to Rose Hill Conservatory. I remember every detail because humiliation sharpens memory. The sky was clear. The parking attendants wore gray vests. Guests walked toward the glass building in pale dresses and dark suits. White roses climbed the entrance arch. A harpist played near the fountain. At the check-in table, a young woman with a headset asked my name. "Natalie Rowan." She looked at the tablet, scrolled again. Her face changed. One moment. My mother appeared before the young woman returned. She moved quickly, smiling for guests, gripping my elbow hard enough to hurt. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I came to my sister's wedding." Her smile stayed fixed for the people passing behind me. This is not the place. For what? For your point. I looked past her toward the seating chart. The Callahan family was listed in gold script. The Rowans had their own section. Graham and Meredith Rowan, parents of the bride. No Natalie. My father came up behind Mom. He looked smaller than he had at the engagement dinner, but his voice was flat. Natalie, go home? I stared at him. What? You were not invited. The words were simple. That made them worse. Mom glanced toward the garden doors. This day is for people who chose Sloane. You chose paperwork. I held the gift tighter. I chose Nana's trust. You chose control, she said. A woman in a silver dress had paused near the entrance. I recognized her from photos. Celeste Callahan, the groom's mother. She looked from my face to my mother's hand on my arm. Meredith, is everything all right? My mother turned with the grace of a stage curtain. Of course, just a small family misunderstanding. Celeste looked at me. And you are? I waited. My mother answered before I could. A relative. A relative, not daughter, not sister. A relative. The word moved through me like cold water. I looked at my father. He looked at the floor. That was the final invitation I needed. I placed the wrapped gift on the check-in table. Please make sure Sloane gets this. Mom hissed, do not be dramatic. I took my hand from her grip. I am being very calm. Then I turned and walked back down the stone path, past the white roses, past the harp music, past the guests who politely pretended not to watch. No one chased me, not my father, not my mother, not my sister. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel and waited for the crying to begin. It did not. That scared me more. Numbness is not peace. It is pain holding its breath. I drove 20 minutes to a gas station outside Pittsburgh, changed out of my heels in the parking lot, bought a coffee I did not want, and finally opened my phone. There was one text from an unknown number. This is Elise, Drew's cousin. I am sorry. I thought you should see this. Attached were 3 photos. The first was the ceremony program. Parents of the bride, Graham and Meredith Rowan, sister of the bride, none listed. The second was a screenshot from a group chat called Rose Hill Final. Sloane, if Natalie shows up, Mom is handling it. Meredith, she will not be seated. Graham, keep it quiet. Drew, my mother doesn't need to know the trust drama. Sloane, I don't want her in pictures after what she is doing to us. The third photo was of my gift sitting under the check-in table, half hidden behind a box of programs. I saved everything, then I drove home. I did not call, I did not text, I did not post. I did not warn them that 3 days later, paperwork would do what I had refused to do in the garden. It would make a scene. Monday morning at 9:12, I received an email from Harborline Title Services. Subject, urgent signature required. Larkspur Farm closing package. Dear Ms. Rowan, we are preparing for closing on the sale of Larkspur Farm, 118 Mill Creek Road, Havenbrook, Pennsylvania. Your signature is required on the enclosed beneficiary consent and administrative trustee certificate before funds can be released. Please sign electronically by 5 in the afternoon today to avoid delay. Regards, Don Keller, Senior Settlement Officer. I read it twice, then I read it again. Closing, funds, released. My family had not been considering the sale, they had scheduled it. I opened the attached documents. There was a purchase agreement, not the old letter of intent. Sale price, $1,375,000. Buyer, Keystone Ridge Mill Creek, LLC. Seller listed through the Alina Rowan Preservation Trust. Expected disbursements included mortgage payoff on my parents' home, vendor liens related to Rose Hill Conservatory, repayment of a private bridge loan from Drew Callahan, and remaining beneficiary distributions. Vendor liens related to Rose Hill Conservatory. My sister's wedding had not just been expensive. It had been financed against a closing that required my name. That night, I opened the trust again and read it the way I read grant agreements before a city council meeting. Slowly, with a notebook, with no room for wishful thinking. Section 4.2 required both remainder beneficiaries to receive written notice of any proposed sale. I had received none. Section 4.4 required any commercial buyer to disclose development purpose, zoning plans, and related parties. Drew's connection to Keystone Ridge was not disclosed. Section 5.1 required the administrative trustee to certify that the sale was not being used primarily to satisfy personal debts of a non-beneficiary. The draft disbursement statement was almost a confession: mortgage payoff, wedding vendor balance, bridge loan, business line of credit. It was all there, dressed in settlement language, waiting for my signature to make it respectable. I made a timeline: Nana's death, first developer letter, engagement dinner, missing shower invitation, Dad's email, wedding gate, Elise's screenshots, Harbor Line's urgent request. By the time I finished, it was after midnight. The apartment was silent except for the hum of my refrigerator, and I understood something I had not wanted to understand. They had not excluded me despite needing my signature. They had excluded me because they thought needing me made them entitled to punish me first. I called Don Keller. He answered with the cheerful fatigue of a man who had already had too much Monday. Harbor Line title, Don speaking. This is Natalie Rowan. You emailed me a closing package. Oh good, Ms. Rowan. Yes, we are trying to keep things moving. Your father said you were traveling after the wedding and might be slow to respond. My father is not authorized to speak for my signature. A pause. Understood. Who told you I consented to this sale? Another pause. Longer. We were provided minutes from a family meeting indicating all beneficiaries were in agreement pending final signatures. There was no family meeting. His voice changed, not alarmed, professional. Ms. Rowan, I think it would be best if we include counsel. I agree. Do you have an attorney? I will within the hour. I hung up and called Mara Keene. Mara had handled a grant dispute for the city 2 years earlier. She was not a family lawyer. She was better. She was a real estate attorney with the calm of a locked file cabinet. I sent her the trust, the closing package, the screenshots, the program photo, and Nana's letter. She called me back 40 minutes later. Natalie, she said, do not sign anything. I was not planning to. Good, because this closing is not clean. How bad? Bad enough that the title company will not want to touch it once they understand the consent issue. The trust does allow sale under certain conditions, but it requires informed written consent from both adult beneficiaries and your administrative certificate. They appear to have represented that consent existed. They lied. That is a plain way to say it. Can they force me? No. Can they sell without me? Not cleanly, not under these documents. I closed my eyes. What happens if I refuse? Closing fails unless restructured. Buyer may pursue your father or whoever made warranties they could not fulfill. Wedding vendors and personal debts remain personal debts. The farm remains in trust. My phone buzzed while she spoke. Dad, then Mom, then Sloane, then Dad again. Mara said, they know you were C. Contacted, yes, good, let them write. Within 5 minutes, the text started. Dad, Natalie, call me now, this is urgent. Mom, do not punish your sister because your feelings were hurt. Sloane, if you ruin this closing after ruining my wedding, I will never forgive you. Dad, you do not understand the consequences. I looked at that one for a long time, then I wrote back one sentence. I understand documents. I did not respond again. That afternoon, Mara sent a formal notice to Harbor Line Title. She stated that I had not consented to the sale, had not attended any family meeting approving it, disputed any representation of unanimous beneficiary approval, and requested all documents, communications, closing statements, and affidavits related to the transaction. At 4:38, Don Keller replied. Closing paused pending review. 2 words in that email mattered. Closing paused, not canceled, not yet. Paused. That gave my family enough time to do what they always did when truth slowed them down. They gathered an audience. Mara called me back again that evening after reviewing the county records. They recorded a notice of pending sale last week, she said. Can they do that? They can record many things. Recording something does not make it clean. But Natalie, there is also a document labeled Family Consent Memorandum. My hand tightened around the phone. What does it say? It says a Rowan family meeting occurred on May 4th at your parents' home. It lists Graham, Meredith, Sloane, Drew, and you as present by phone. It says all parties agreed in principle to the Keystone Ridge sale subject to final closing documents. I sat down slowly. I was not on any phone call. I know, May 4th was the bridal shower. Exactly. For a moment, I could not speak. Not because I was shocked they had lied. I had enough evidence for that already, because the lie was so ordinary on the page. My name typed into a sentence. My consent reduced to a line item. My absence rewritten as cooperation. Mara's voice softened. This is why we put everything in writing tomorrow. I looked at the wedding folder on my desk. They wanted my name without me in the room. Then Thursday, Mara said, we put you in the room. Tuesday evening, my mother called and left a voicemail. Your father and I have arranged a meeting Thursday at Harborline. Sloane and Drew will be there. The buyer will be there. This needs to be resolved like adults. Bring your attorney if that makes you feel powerful. I played it twice. Bring your attorney if that makes you feel powerful. I sent it to Mara. She replied, I will be there. Bring the wedding program, screenshots, trust copy, and your grandmother's letter. Then she added, do not let them turn a legal meeting into family theater. If they do, we will use the theater. Thursday morning, I wore a gray suit, low heels, and the small silver necklace Nana had given me when I graduated college. The pendant was shaped like a lark, because she said every woman needed one thing that reminded her she could leave a bad room. In my bag were 6 things: the trust file, the Harborline closing package, the Rose Hill wedding program showing I was not listed, the screenshot saying I would not be seated, a photo of my gift under the check-in table, Nana's letter. I arrived at Harborline Title at 9:50. Mara was waiting in the lobby, navy suit, silver glasses, leather portfolio. She looked at me once and said, you slept badly. Is that legal advice? No, human observation. I did. Good, you are human. Now remember, you are not here to convince them you were hurt. You are here to state what is true. The conference room was glass-walled on one side, which made the whole thing feel less private than my parents probably wanted. Don Keller sat at the head of the table with a laptop open and 3 folders stacked neatly in front of him. Beside him was a woman named Taryn Voss from the buyer's legal team. The buyer himself, a man in a charcoal suit named Victor Hale, sat near the window, looking irritated before anyone spoke. My family was already there. Dad in a navy blazer, Mom in cream, pearls, and a face arranged for injury. Sloane in a white cardigan, wedding nails still perfect, eyes swollen from either crying or not sleeping. Drew beside her, jaw tight. Celeste Callahan sat at the far end, which surprised me. She looked composed, but not comfortable. Maybe she had come to understand why a relative had been handled at the gate. When I entered, Sloane looked away. Mom stared at my attorney. Dad said, this is unnecessary. Mara placed her portfolio on the table. Good morning. That was all. Don cleared his throat. Thank you, everyone, for coming. The purpose of this meeting is to address unresolved consent issues regarding the Larkspur farm sale. Victor Hale leaned forward. I was told this was a family signature delay. Mara looked at him. It is a title and authority issue. Dad's face reddened. With respect, this is our family's property. No, Mara said, it is trust property. Quiet, a small difference, a huge one. Don opened the file. Ms. Rowan, your signature is required on the beneficiary consent and administrative trustee certificate. I understand. Are you willing to sign today? No. Sloane made a small sound. Mom closed her eyes. Dad leaned forward. Natalie. I looked at Don, not my father. No, I did not consent to this sale. I did not attend any family meeting approving it, and I will not certify that the conditions of the trust have been satisfied. Don clicked through the file on his screen. For the record, he said, Harborline received a family consent memorandum dated May 4th. Mara looked at me. I nodded. Don read, all adult interested family members discussed the Keystone Ridge offer and agreed in principle to move forward. Natalie Rowan participated by phone and did not object. My mother stared at the table. My father rubbed his thumb over the side of his wedding ring. I opened my folder and placed the bridal shower photo beside the memorandum copy Mara had printed. May 4th, I said, was Sloane's shower at the Foxglove Tea Room. I was not invited. I was in Lancaster at a city budget review from 10 until 2. Here is the calendar entry, here is the meeting attendance sheet, and here is my mother's own social media post showing the family gathering I was not part of. Taran Voss read the documents without expression. Victor Hale muttered something under his breath. Mara said, "So the issue is not merely unsigned consent. The issue is a written representation that my client participated in a meeting that did not occur." Dad said it was informal. I looked at him. What part was informal, the lie or using my name? Victor turned to Dad. "You said both daughters were aligned." Dad's mouth tightened. "We believed Natalie would not obstruct." Mara said, "That is not alignment." Drew jumped in. "Can we not turn this into semantics? The family needs this closing." I looked at him for the first time. The family did not need me at the wedding. Sloane's head snapped up. "Oh my God, is that what this is? Revenge because you could not sit through one day without being difficult." I reached into my folder and placed the wedding program on the table. No flourish, no speech, just paper. Where was I supposed to sit? Her mouth opened. No answer came. I placed the screenshot beside it. "Sloane, if Natalie shows up, Mom is handling it. Meredith, she will not be seated. Drew, my mother doesn't need to know the trust drama. Sloane, I don't want her in pictures after what she is doing to us." Celeste Callahan leaned forward slowly and read the page. Drew's face changed when he saw his own line. My mother whispered, "Private family messages have nothing to do with this transaction." Mara said, "They have to do with whether my client was treated as a consenting family beneficiary or intentionally excluded, while her signature was being represented as available." Taran Voss, the buyer's attorney, picked up a copy. "Mr. Rowan, did you disclose to my client that one required signatory was not in agreement?" Dad looked at Don. Don looked at the file. Victor looked at my father like the price of the land had just changed shape. Dad said we expected to resolve it. "By excluding her from the wedding?" Celeste Callahan asked. Every head turned. Her voice was quiet, elegant, and lethal. My mother stiffened. "Celeste, this is family pain. You understand weddings are emotional." Celeste lifted the program. "At my son's wedding, you introduced your own daughter as a relative." I had forgotten she heard that, or maybe I had forced myself not to hope it mattered. Mom's face drained. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, "it was a definition." Mara placed the trust document on the table. The trust requires informed written consent and administrative certification. It also requires that a commercial development sale not be compelled for personal debt satisfaction without independent review. The proposed closing statement includes payment of wedding vendor balances, a private bridge loan, and unrelated household obligations. Taran looked sharply at Don. Don looked miserable. Those disbursements were provided by the seller's side. Victor pushed back his chair slightly. "I am not buying litigation." Dad said, "There is no litigation." Mara looked at him. "There will be if someone attempts to proceed without my client's consent." Sloane started crying. Not loudly, not performatively at first. Real panic had entered the room. "Our vendors are waiting," she said. "The conservatory balance is due tomorrow." Drew's parents covered the final deposit because Dad said the closing was Thursday. "Do you understand what this does to me?" I looked at my sister, really looked. The bride from 3 days ago was gone. In her place was my little sister, terrified. Furious, still waiting for someone else to turn consequences into comfort. "I understand exactly what it does," I said. "That is why you should have asked before building your wedding on my signature. You were trying to stop us from the beginning. I was trying to read the documents." Mom's voice rose for the first time. "You and your documents. Your grandmother filled your head with suspicion." I pulled out Nana's letter. Dad went still. I had not shown them this before. "What is that?" he asked. "Something Nana left with the trust file." I unfolded it. I did not read all of it. Not then, just the line that mattered. If they ask you to sign, ask them who was family before the money was needed. No one spoke. The lines seemed to move around the room, sitting beside each person differently. Mara said nothing. She did not need to. Celeste Callahan stared at my mother. Victor Hale closed his folder. Dad looked down at the table. Mom whispered, "Alina never forgave me." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe she understood you." That landed harder. Sloane wiped her face. "So what do you want, an apology? Fine, I'm sorry you felt left out." "No, what do you mean no? I mean that is not an apology. That is a weather report." Drew muttered, "This is absurd." Celeste looked at him. "Drew," one word, he stopped. I looked at Dawn. "I will not sign the sale to Keystone Ridge. I am willing to consider options consistent with the trust: preservation sale, conservation easement, family buyout with documented financing, or continued trust ownership. I will not certify a commercial development sale being used to pay wedding debt." Dad said, "You would let us lose everything." "No," I said. "I am refusing to let you spend what Nana protected." Mom's voice cracked. "She was my family too." "Then why did you wait until you needed money to honor her papers?" The buyer stood. "I think we are done here." Taryn nodded. "Keystone Ridge is suspending participation pending title clarity and reviewing remedies under the purchase agreement." Dad looked at her. "Remedies? You represented authority and consent," she said. "We relied on that." Drew's face turned red. Victor looked at him. "You also represented no family dispute." Drew stood halfway. I relayed what I was told. Celeste Callahan closed her eyes. For the first time that day, I felt almost sorry for her. Her family had been pulled into a lie wearing white roses. Don Keller spoke carefully. "Harbor Line will not proceed without unanimous proper authorization and clearance from council." There it was, the room's actual verdict, not my anger, not my pain, the file. Dad sat back as if someone had cut a string. Mom stared at me with a kind of disbelief I recognized from childhood. The look she gave me when I did not become the shape she needed. Sloane whispered, "You ruined my wedding." I looked at her. "No, Sloane, you had your wedding, you ruined the bill." She flinched. I gathered my papers. Mara placed one hand lightly on my folder, not stopping me, just steadying the moment. My father said my name, not sharply, not as a command. "Natalie." I looked at him. His face had changed. The public gram was gone. What remained was an exhausted man sitting among failed promises. I thought I could fix it before anyone knew. I believed him. That was the tragedy. He had thought hiding the truth was the same as protecting the family. He had thought my signature would arrive like every other responsible thing I had ever done. "I know," I said. "That is what you always thought I was for." He looked away. My mother said nothing. Celeste Callahan stood then. "Meredith, Graham, we will handle our obligations directly with the vendors we contacted, but do not involve my family in another financial arrangement without full disclosure." Drew stared at his mother. "Mom." "No," she said. "A marriage should not begin with concealed debt and a missing sister at the gate." Sloane began crying again, quieter now. I did not comfort her. That may sound cruel if you have never been assigned the job of making everyone else's consequences survivable, but sometimes not comforting is the first honest thing you do. I walked out of Harbor Line Title at 11:18 with the farm still protected. The closing paused, and my hands shaking so badly Mara took my car keys and told me we were getting coffee before I drove anywhere. At the cafe across the street, I sat with a paper cup between my palms and finally cried. Mara looked out the window and gave me the privacy of not watching. After a minute, she said, "You did well. It does not feel like well. It rarely does. I keep thinking about the gate. I know. They said I was not family." Mara stirred her coffee. "Then 3 days later, they confirmed you were legally essential." That made me laugh once through tears. That is a terrible family motto. It is a useful legal summary. A week after the failed closing, Elise sent one Ray photo. It was from the reception, taken near the head table after I had left. My parents stood with Sloane and Drew, all smiling under chandeliers, while behind them, on a small side table, sat my wrapped gift. Someone had eventually moved it from under the check-in table but had not opened it. The card was still taped to the top. To Sloane and Drew. I zoomed in until the letters blurred. For years, I had thought humiliation meant being shouted at. I was learning that sometimes humiliation is quieter. It is your name written carefully on a card no one reads. It is a seat that never existed. It is a family smiling in front of a gift from the person they told to leave. I saved the photo. Then I deleted the copy from my phone. Some evidence is useful. Some evidence becomes a room you keep walking back into. The sale did not close. Keystone Ridge withdrew 2 weeks later and sent a demand letter to my father and Drew for costs tied to the failed transaction. I do not know every detail of how that settled. Mara told me enough. Money changed hands, but not mine, and not from the trust. Rose Hill Conservatory was paid late. Some vendors were angry. Drew's parents covered more than they planned, then made Drew sign a repayment agreement before they paid anything else. That detail came from Celeste Callahan herself, in a letter I did not expect. It arrived 3 weeks after the Harbor Line meeting, on cream stationery with her initials at the top. Natalie, I owe you an apology. At the wedding, I heard enough to know something was wrong and did not ask the right question. I allowed Meredith to define you as a problem because that was more convenient than interrupting a beautiful day. That was cowardly. I am sorry. I also want you to know that the watercolor you left for Sloane was found under the check-in table. I have it. If you would like it returned, I will send it. If you would rather it be destroyed, I will understand. Celeste Callahan. I read the letter 3 times, then I wrote back, please send it. The painting arrived wrapped in brown paper. Larkspur Farm at sunset, lavender rose, white farmhouse, sycamores by the creek. In the corner, the artist had painted one small open gate. I hung it in my hallway, not because Sloane deserved the gift, because I deserved to stop leaving beautiful things under tables where people hid me. My father called a month later. I almost did not answer. Hi, he said, that was all, not Natalie in a warning voice, not we need to talk, just hi. Hi, long silence. Your mother does not know I am calling. Of course she didn't, I figured. I went to the farm yesterday, I waited. The porch is worse than I thought, back step needs replacing, barn roof too. Yes, I found Mom's lavender shears in the shed. I closed my eyes, he sounded older. I sat there a while, he said. I kept thinking about that line you read. I said nothing. Who was family before the money was needed, he repeated. My throat tightened. I do not have a good answer, he said. That is the answer. He exhaled, I am sorry. 2 words, no but no because, no your mother, no pressure, just I am sorry. I sat down on the hallway floor under the painting. For what? He swallowed. I heard it. For letting your mother turn you into the obstacle because I was too ashamed to admit I needed help. For letting Sloane believe your caution was cruelty. For not stopping you at the gate myself and saying you belonged there. My eyes filled. I looked at you, I said. You looked at the floor. I know, that may be the part I remember most. I know. We did not fix everything in that call. People who want clean endings do not understand how deep some damage goes. But one clean apology can become a board across a flooded place. Not a bridge yet, a board. Sloane did not call for 2 months. When she finally did, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. I found the card you wrote, the one with the painting. Celeste gave it to me after she sent the painting back. I read the line about a marriage built on truth. I hated you for writing it, then I hated that you were right. A pause. Drew and I are not great. I don't know what happens next. I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted to say I know Mom told you to come and then told you to leave. I let her. I am sorry for that. I saved the voicemail. I did not call back that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, I sent one text. I heard your apology. Thank you. I am not ready for normal, but I heard it. She replied, I understand. That was new. My mother was the last, not because she took longest to apologize, because she still has not. She sent one card at Thanksgiving. The front had a watercolor pumpkin and the inside said, family is complicated, but love remains. She wrote underneath, I hope one day you can remember we did our best. I placed it in a folder labeled not yet. That folder is not forgiveness. It is not resentment either. It is a place where I put things I am not willing to carry, but not ready to throw away. Larkspur Farm is still in the trust. That winter, Mara helped me arrange a conservation assessment. The land may qualify for a preservation easement that would protect the creek and fields while allowing the farmhouse to be restored. It will not make anyone rich quickly. That is part of why I like it. Dad has started helping with repairs, not as owner, not as hero, just as a man replacing rotten boards on a porch his mother loved. Sometimes I join him. We work mostly in silence. Once, he brought coffee and did not ask for anything. I noticed. He noticed that I noticed. Sloane has come once. She stood in the kitchen where Nana taught me to read tax statements and touched the edge of the table. "I did not know she made you trustee," she said. "You never asked." She nodded. "No, I didn't." Then she looked out at the lavender rows, dead for winter but still holding their shape. "I think I liked being the one people protected," she said. I looked at her. "And I hated you for being the reason they looked worried." That was not a pretty apology. It was better. Pretty apologies are often written for the person giving them. Ugly, truthful ones sometimes have a chance. "We are not close, we may never be, but she came to the farm, and for once she did not take a picture. That mattered." As for me, I still work in compliance. I still read documents before signing. I still hear my mother's voice sometimes when a room goes tense. "Do not make a scene. Do not be difficult. Do not ruin this." But now I hear Nana too. Urgency is where people hide bad math. And I hear my own voice, the one that finally learned not every scene is made by the person telling the truth. Sometimes the scene was built by the people who thought your silence came with the contract. My parents said I was not family at my sister's wedding. 3 days later, they needed my signature. I did not sign, not because I wanted revenge, because family is not a word people get to erase at the gate and restore at the closing table. That is my story. If you have ever been pushed out until your name was needed, tell me what you would have done. Would you have signed, refused, or made them read every document out loud? Share this with someone who needs permission to stop being useful to people who will not claim them. Subscribe to Hush and Tell Stories for more stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, painful truth, and the moment someone finally protects what was left in their hands. I will see you in the next one.